Something unsettling is happening across Canadian shopping malls, and most people haven't even noticed yet. Walk through any major shopping center today, and you'll see the remnants of what was once a retail revolution. The Body Shop, the iconic beauty brand that championed ethical cosmetics for decades, began its Canadian collapse in early 2024. When the company filed for bankruptcy protection, it wasn't just closing a few underperforming locations. It shuttered 33 stores in a single wave, leaving nearly a third of its Canadian footprint abandoned. The stores closed in cities from Toronto to Calgary, from Edmonton to St. John. What makes this particularly chilling is the company's debt load, over $3.3 million owed to creditors, a fraction of what it once commanded in market respect. Retail analysts point to a brutal truth: the Body Shop lost its competitive edge. When it pioneered cruelty-free beauty products, it stood alone. But as major competitors like Lush adopted similar practices, the Body Shop became just another option in an oversaturated market. The brand failed to evolve, lacking investment in digital infrastructure, while younger consumers shifted their loyalty elsewhere. By December 2024, even more stores were marked for closure as new ownership took control, promising a rationalized footprint that really meant fewer jobs and emptier malls. Remember when Toys R Us was the ultimate destination for every child's birthday wish list? That memory is rapidly becoming just that, a memory. Throughout 2025, Toys R Us Canada has been quietly dismantling its empire, closing stores with barely a whisper to local communities. The company initially announced 5 Ontario closures in January, locations in London, Thornhill, Mississauga, Sudbury, and Hamilton. But that was just the beginning of something far more extensive. By mid-2025, reports emerged that nearly 38 stores had closed or were slated for closure, with another 12 locations put up for sale. In Metro Vancouver alone, 3 stores shut down: the Broadway location, Lower Sahalee and Kamloops, and Belleville's Quint Mall. The Maritimes faced similar devastation, with confirmed closures in St. John and Dartmouth Crossing, while uncertainty hangs over Fredericton's location. What's happening here reflects a broader industry crisis. The company's parent, Putman Investments, acquired Toys R Us Canada in 2021 with grand ambitions. But between pressure from giants like Amazon and Walmart, combined with the bankruptcy of related family business Everest Toys, the reality couldn't match the vision. According to Quebec's Labor Department, 9 store closures in that province alone resulted in 183 job losses. The national toll remains even higher, with employment lawyers reporting contacts from at least 30 workers seeking guidance after sudden terminations. In January 2025, Canadian fashion retail experienced one of its most dramatic collapses in recent memory. Comark Holdings, the parent company behind Ricky's, Clio, and Bootlegger, filed for bankruptcy protection and announced the complete shutdown of 2 of its 3 brands. All Ricky's and Clio stores, every single one, would close permanently. The company operates 221 stores across 8 provinces, employing more than 2,000 people, and the liquidation process would sweep through shopping malls and suburban plazas like a retail hurricane. The numbers tell a devastating story. Court documents reveal 75 Ricky's stores, 54 Clio locations, 20 joint storefronts, and roughly 19 sites shared with Bootlegger, all heading toward liquidation. Founded in 1939, Ricky's had served Canadian women for over 80 years. Clio, established in the 1960s as Irene Hill, represented affordable professional wear for working women. Both brands became casualties of forces beyond their control. The COVID-19 pandemic forced prolonged closures, bleeding cash reserves. Then, in November 2021, a ransomware attack crippled their operations, disrupting supply chains and vendor relationships. But the final blow came from ultra-low-cost fashion retailers like Shein and Temu, flooding the market with impossibly cheap alternatives. By Christmas 2024, the company owed $61 million to vendors, landlords, and partners, debts that would never be repaid. Gift cards became worthless after January 17, 2025, leaving customers scrambling and employees jobless. Montreal-based Frank & Oak positioned itself as the future of sustainable fashion, stylish clothing with an environmental conscience. The brand attracted young urban professionals who wanted to look good while feeling good about their purchases. But in December 2024, the company filed for creditor protection under the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, drowning in $71 million of debt. The majority was owed to its parent company, Unified Commerce Group, and to Desjardins, with smaller amounts to the Canada Border Services Agency, the Canada Revenue Agency, and even Shopify. By April 2025, Frank & Oak announced plans to close most of its 15 stores, keeping only Greater Toronto area locations open temporarily while seeking a buyer. The Quebec stores would shutter first, along with both Vancouver locations, all holding liquidation sales as they emptied their shelves. Retail analysts who visited the stores before closure noted something disturbing. The merchandise looked dated and uninspired, the sales associates lacked proper training, and the overall experience felt hollow. Frank & Oak had struggled financially since 2020, never recovering from pandemic-related losses. The brand's promise of sustainability became insufficient when competitors offered similar values alongside better product assortments and stronger customer service. The e-commerce website continues operating, a ghost of what the brand once hoped to become, while empty storefronts mark where physical locations once welcomed customers. When Nordstrom announced its entry into Canada in 2012, it was heralded as a game-changer for luxury retail. The Seattle-based department store giant opened its first Canadian location at Calgary's CF Chinook Centre in September 2014, promising the elevated shopping experience Americans had enjoyed for decades. But by March 2023, less than a decade later, Nordstrom admitted complete defeat and announced the closure of all 13 Canadian locations, 6 full-line stores, and 7 Nordstrom Rack outlets. The scale of the withdrawal stunned the industry. 2,500 employees losing their jobs, $15 million in annual Canadian sales evaporating, and massive retail spaces left vacant in premium shopping centers across major cities. CEO Eric Nordstrom didn't mince words in the company's statement. Despite their best efforts, they saw no realistic path to profitability in Canada. The brutal truth revealed in court filings was even more damning. Nordstrom Canada had lost money every single year since opening. The company took financial charges between $300 and $350 million to wind down operations. What went wrong? Canadian consumers found that Nordstrom's promised selection, particularly its renowned shoe department, felt disappointingly limited compared to U.S. locations. High inflation squeezed consumer spending power just as the chain tried to establish itself. The pandemic dealt another devastating blow. By June 2023, the last stores closed their doors, leaving behind questions about whether luxury American retail could ever truly succeed north of the border. February 2023 brought shocking news to Canadian home goods shoppers. Bed Bath & Beyond, the American retail giant famous for its 20% off coupons and extensive product selection, declared its Canadian operations insolvent. The company would close all 54 Bed Bath & Beyond stores and all 11 Bye Bye Baby locations across Canada, terminating 387 full-time employees and 1,038 part-time workers. The liquidation sales began immediately, with the wind down expected to complete by April 2023. Court documents painted a grim picture of financial collapse. For the 9 months ending November 26, 2022, Bed Bath & Beyond Canada reported a staggering net loss of $99.5 million. The company held assets valued at roughly $480 million against liabilities of approximately $430 million, but cash flow had completely dried up. The Canadian division wasn't profitable on a standalone basis and could never be restructured into viability. What's particularly haunting is that this happened just days after the U.S. parent company managed to raise over $1 billion to stave off American bankruptcy. But that emergency funding couldn't save the Canadian branch. The collapse of Bed Bath & Beyond left hundreds of thousands of square feet of vacant retail space across the country, from big box centers to strip malls. An entrepreneur named Doug Putman later attempted to revive the brand as Rooms Plus Spaces, but that venture quickly failed as well, with most locations closing within months of opening. Behind every closure announcement lies a common thread: unprecedented economic pressure reshaping the entire retail landscape. Canada's inflation crisis, which peaked in 2022 and continued throughout 2024, fundamentally altered consumer behavior. Shoppers abandoned traditional grocery chains for smaller local grocers and warehouse stores like Costco, desperately seeking value. According to economic data, real retail sales fell in 6 of the first 7 months of 2024, and by September 2025, volumes dropped 0.8% month over month after adjusting for inflation. Interest rates remained elevated throughout 2024, with the Bank of Canada only beginning aggressive rate cuts in late 2024 and into 2025. But for mortgage holders who locked into ultra-low rates in 2020 and 2021, renewal time brought financial devastation. Even with rate cuts, their payments increased dramatically. Household debt reached alarming levels, with Canadian families owing approximately $1.80 for every dollar of disposable income, far exceeding levels seen in peer economies like the United States. This debt burden forced families to cut discretionary spending drastically. Retail insolvency filings accelerated in 2024 and 2025, with traditional brick-and-mortar stores facing a three-headed monster: relentless competition from e-commerce, supply chain disruptions that increased costs unpredictably, and consumers who simply had less money to spend. The COVID-19 pandemic had already weakened many retailers' financial positions, leaving them vulnerable when economic headwinds intensified. While physical stores struggled and closed, a digital revolution was quietly destroying traditional retail from within. The rise of ultra-low-cost online retailers, particularly Chinese platforms Shein and Temu, created unprecedented competitive pressure. These companies offered fashion and home goods at prices that seemed impossible, shipped directly to Canadian consumers, and operated with minimal overhead. For traditional retailers paying rent, utilities, and staff salaries, competing became mathematically impossible. The shift toward online shopping accelerated during the pandemic and never reversed. E-commerce sales in Canada showed explosive growth in certain categories, even as overall retail struggled. Consumers discovered they could browse larger selections from their couches, compare prices instantly, and have purchases delivered within days. Why drive to a mall, search for parking, and navigate crowds when Amazon offered the same product cheaper with free shipping? The data tells the story. In September 2025, Canadian e-commerce sales declined 3.5% month over month, but only because August had been so strong. The trend line showed steady migration away from physical stores. Retailers like Nordstrom and Bed Bath & Beyond tried maintaining both physical and digital presences, but found themselves squeezed, unable to compete on price with pure online retailers while bearing the cost burden of physical locations. The mathematical reality became undeniable. Stores designed for pre-internet shopping patterns couldn't survive in an economy where consumers increasingly viewed physical retail as a convenience rather than a necessity. Canadian shopping malls, once vibrant community gathering spaces, are experiencing a slow-motion collapse. While overall retail vacancy rates have decreased since their pandemic peak of 2.6% in Q3 2020, enclosed malls continue struggling disproportionately. These massive structures, built during the retail boom of the 1980s and 1990s, were designed for an era when shopping was entertainment. Today, they're becoming expensive monuments to a vanished culture. The closure of anchor tenants creates a devastating domino effect. When Nordstrom shuttered its Eaton Centre location in Toronto or its Vancouver flagship, it didn't just remove one store, it eliminated a major draw that brought foot traffic to dozens of smaller retailers. The same pattern played out with Toys R Us, Bed Bath & Beyond, and the Comark brands. Landlords face an impossible challenge. How do you re-tenant massive spaces designed for department stores when that retail category is dying? Some malls are converting former retail space into medical clinics, fitness centers, or community services. Others are demolishing sections entirely, shrinking their footprints to match diminished demand. The four-quarter rolling average of net absorption in mid-2024 remained below pre-pandemic levels, indicating that recovery remains elusive. Enclosed malls are particularly impacted by reduced spending on discretionary items like fashion and accessories, exactly the categories that once sustained them. The shift toward neighborhood strip centers and standalone stores reflects changing consumer preferences. Quick, convenient trips for necessities rather than leisurely mall excursions. Behind every closure announcement lies a human tragedy that statistics barely capture. When Nordstrom closed, 2,500 workers lost their jobs. Bed Bath & Beyond's closure affected 1,425 employees. The Body Shop's restructuring impacted hundreds more. Ricky's, Clio, and Bootlegger's collapse put over 2,000 people out of work. Toys R Us closures have affected hundreds across the country, with Quebec alone seeing 183 job losses. These aren't just numbers, they're families losing income, professionals seeing their careers evaporate, and communities watching local economic activity disappear. The employment crisis extends beyond direct retail workers. Every store closure impacts landlords who lose rental income, property tax revenues that municipalities depend on, suppliers who lose major customers, and logistics companies handling reduced freight volumes. When a Toys R Us closes in a maritime town, it doesn't just affect store employees, it ripples through the entire local economy. Workers over 50 face particular hardship, finding that decades of retail experience count for little in job markets increasingly dominated by technology and e-commerce. Young workers lose entry-level opportunities that once provided first jobs and workplace skills. Employment lawyers report being contacted by workers who received little warning before termination, some learning their stores were closing only days beforehand. The psychological impact compounds the financial stress. Retail workers often develop deep connections with regular customers and fellow employees. Sudden closures sever those relationships without warning or ceremony, leaving people processing loss that extends beyond mere job loss. The retail collapse isn't hitting all regions equally. Ontario, as Canada's most populous province and traditional retail hub, faces disproportionate pain. When Toys R Us announced closures, 5 of the initially announced locations were in Ontario. The Comark liquidation impacted dozens of Ontario stores, including prominent locations in Toronto, Hamilton, Oshawa, Oakville, and Burlington. Bed Bath & Beyond's closure included 27 stores in Ontario, half the national total. This concentration reflects Ontario's role as Canada's retail engine, but it also means the province bears an outsized burden of economic disruption. The Maritimes face different challenges. Smaller populations mean fewer stores to begin with, so each closure carries magnified impact. When Toys R Us closed locations in St. John and Dartmouth Crossing, it eliminated major retail anchors from communities with limited alternatives. Uncertainty surrounds stores in Fredericton and Dieppe, leaving residents unsure whether these retailers will survive. Western provinces haven't escaped either. Alberta saw significant Bed Bath & Beyond closures, with 17 stores shuttering. British Columbia lost Body Shop locations in White Rock, Vernon, and Victoria, plus multiple Toys R Us stores, including Vancouver Broadway and locations in Kelowna and Kamloops. Quebec's retail landscape contracted with Body Shop's exit years ago, a warning sign that went unheeded, followed by waves of closures from other chains. The geographic imbalance creates a spiral effect. As stores close in smaller markets, the remaining retailers face reduced foot traffic and increased pressure, making future closures more likely. What we're witnessing isn't a temporary disruption, it's a fundamental restructuring of Canadian retail. The warning signs point toward continued upheaval in coming years. Population growth, once a reliable driver of retail expansion, is reversing for the first time since Confederation. The federal government's sharp pivot on immigration policy means Canada's population may actually contract in 2025, removing a key source of new consumers. Labor force constraints will follow, creating wage pressures that squeeze already thin retail margins. Tariff uncertainties loom large on the horizon. Potential 25% tariffs on Canadian exports to the United States, with promised retaliation, would drive up costs for imported goods and domestically manufactured products that rely on imports. Consumers would face higher prices exactly when they're least able to afford them, further suppressing retail demand. The survivors of this retail apocalypse will be those who adapt radically, Stores that offer experiences rather than just products, retailers with flexible online-offline hybrid models, and brands that understand value-conscious consumers seeking quality without luxury price tags. The era of traditional department stores appears finished. Mid-sized chains without clear differentiation face extinction. Only nimble operators with strong digital capabilities, intimate understanding of local markets, and ability to manage debt while maintaining customer loyalty will navigate what's coming. For Canadian shoppers, the message is clear. The retail landscape of tomorrow will look nothing like the one we've known. Empty storefronts aren't anomalies. They're the new normal, harbingers of transformation that's only just beginning.